Hey guys, what's up? So I've been doing a lot of Zwift racing this year, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how Zwift racing is different from real racing. I've done some real races. I've done a lot of fast road rides, I'm a fan of racing. I watch a lot of different kinds of racing, so I feel like Zwift is unique and it's different from real racing, but there's some similarities too. So obviously you're on a trainer, and for me, I can't create as much power on the trainer, especially like maximum power. There's just less movement, so I don't know. You're just less fluid. Less stimulus and less adrenaline. I think for the most part, you're going to be a lot more excited in a real race than you are on Zwift, even though you can still get that same adrenaline rush on Zwift of being like chased and being hanging on and all that stuff. It's there. It's just, it's a game. So every Zwift race I've ever done has a fast start. The shorter races, the ones that are like 30 minutes or so, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they're going to have a balls to the wall start that is just like really nothing else in cycling. Even the longer races have a pretty fast start. So on Zwift, your power is ready to go the moment that the lights turn green. Whatever power you have produced for the last 3 seconds is just like ejected straight into the road, and you take off like crazy. So warm up is really important. It's always important to warm up, but it's double important to warm up for Zwift racing. I'm a slow to warm up rider. I need a lot of time, sometimes like an hour or more to warm up. The closest thing I could think that it resembles is cyclocross. Usually starts with a crazy sprint to get to the first tight section. Mountain biking usually has a sprint on some kind of open grassy area or field or road or something to get to the first trail. So it's pretty similar to that. The sprint lasts about a minute. A strategy for me is on those starts, I try to put off the minimum amount possible to just stay in the back, because when it slows down, you're probably going to be able to catch back up as long as you're still within that draft. So I don't want to be in the front in that start. I just want to be in the start. The Zwift race itself, well, like I said, you got a full gas start, then you've got about 80%, and then you've got a full gas finish. And real racing probably isn't really structured like that in any kind of event. Real racing is probably going to be more like a ramp up to that. Instead of hard, slow, hard, it's going to just keep getting harder to the end. At least that's my experience. The full gas finish, oftentimes there's a little lull there, and then it just whoosh, full gas finish. The last lap is usually pretty hard, but the real efforts, that first, usually that's the hardest effort, is that first one or 2 minutes just to stay in that front group. So there's no bike handling, there's no traffic, there's no turns, and you can just ride through other riders. And that really changes the fact. It means that you're pretty much always pedaling. In a real race, you're going to occasionally either stop pedaling, coast a little bit. And in Zwift, you really can't do that. I think if you stop pedaling in Zwift, you almost always feel like you're riding against a headwind, and you just slow down too fast, and you're going to get kicked out of the group. So unless you're going downhill and you got maybe a little bit of a weight advantage over the other riders, it's really hard to stop pedaling. And then the other thing that to me makes the race different is you have total information. Now some races will disable the scoreboard, but most races I do in events will have the scoreboard there, so you can see like all the riders around you, like how much watts per kilogram they're putting out. And that makes it, when somebody's coming up behind you, you can see they're coming from quite a distance away, and it makes it difficult to really like get a jump on somebody, with all that information that they have. So the biggest one that you're going to see is drafting, and the drafting model, as far as I can figure it out, and I've done some research, but there's not a lot of information I can find. It's 5 meters all or nothing. So if you're within 5 meters of another rider or group of riders, you're going to get a draft, the same draft you'd get if you were like 1 meter. But if you go beyond 5 meters, it's gone. And that seems to play out to me in the actual game. In real life, it's nothing like that. The wind is not modeled in Zwift. There's no wind for one thing. There's zero wind at all times. But also, when you're riding, there is no like sweet spot in the draft. The draft doesn't ever change. I'm assuming the faster you go, I'm pretty sure based on my experience, the faster you go, the more draft there is. But it's kind of just very static draft. So they have something called draft lock. So when you get into somebody's draft, the game tries to kind of keep you there. Makes it a little bit harder for you to break out of the draft and a little bit harder to fall out, it says. So here's the other huge difference. In a real situation, when you find somebody's draft, you get into that draft, you start to find a less resistance on the pedals. You're pushing less air, and all of a sudden you have less resistance on the pedals. If you continue to push hard, you'll either ride right around that person or ride right into the back of them. So you just, 10, 15, 20% less effort, less watts on the pedals. In Zwift, I don't have a smart trainer, so I can't have less resistance, so I'm automatically going to go faster. But even riders with a smart trainer, there is no less resistance on drafting. Same thing, you just go faster. So resistance is only tied to the road grade, not drafting. So same thing, they're going to have to do the same thing I do, which is to mentally remember to kind of just back off when you get into that draft. Try to cut the power so you don't swoop past the other rider. A lot of people really complain that drafting is not very realistic, because once you lose the draft, once you lose the blob, and the peloton is often called a blob in Zwift, once you lose that, you're never going to get back. And to me, I think that's actually pretty realistic. I mean, in a race, if you get dropped from the pack, unless there's a downhill, unless they slow down some turns or something, you're probably not going to be able to catch them out just on an open road. I mean, if you got dropped, I mean, like if you're stronger and you want to slow down and catch back up, yeah. But in a race, I mean, I don't think that's that unrealistic, but it makes it very hard to attack off the front. I think part of the reasons why, if you do sprint and attack off the front in the real world, that draft, you're probably going to move side to side, cut that draft a little bit, and then they're going to have to respawn and go up the road with you. It just seems like it's hard to get away from other riders when they want to stay with you in Zwift. And honestly, it is in the real world. I don't think the drafting is as unrealistic. To me, it's not so much the drafting. It's just the fact that you don't get any feedback from the drafting. And if you push too hard, you'll ride right past the person, and end up outside the draft. And it creates this blob because riders are constantly shifting all the time, back and forth, passing each other, instead of a more organized peloton. It's more of a blah, like an amoeba type thing. So next up is cheating and cheaters. I mean, a lot of people think Zwift is completely full of cheaters. I don't really know. I mean, I'm cheating a little bit on my weight, and honestly, who cares? It's a video game. If that's your excuse not to race, that's just kind of a lame excuse, because, I mean, who knows and who cares? I mean, if you're that upset and that worried about it, then obviously Zwift racing is not for you, because it could be anybody on the other end of that computer. It could even be a program. You don't know. It doesn't. I'm sure that there's a lot of sandbagging, but anti-sandbagging has kind of fixed that a little bit. But I just think that that's something that you just need to like strip that from your mind and not worry about it. If you're not getting paid to do it, and if there's no money on the line, and then you know what, I think just make it fun for yourself and don't worry about it. So finally, what is Zwift most like? Well, like I said, it has a start like a cyclocross or mountain bike, but even those, usually it's probably not going to be a minute sprint. You know, it's not going to be a minute. It might be, but it's probably not. It's probably going to be more like 20 or 30 seconds, and then it's going to slow down and get into the technical stuff. So it's not really like that. So the closest thing I can come up to, you know, what it's like, it's a lot like a time trial, with the added element in that the time trial has an elimination. If you don't make a certain time cut, you're kicked out the back. The structure, though, when you're riding it, it does feel a lot like a time trial based on the fact that you don't ever stop pedaling. And in a real race, you know, you take a corner, you slow down, and you sprint again. There's a lot of 0 watts, 500 watts, 0 watts, 600 watts. In Zwift, it's just 250, 250, 250, or 300 or whatever. And you know, it's a different kind of racing. So if you're a time trialist and you're somebody who can really just put down power nonstop without needing recovery, then you're gonna probably enjoy the Zwift racing and do well at it. If you're somebody like me who needs some recovery, you might find that even if you're on the heavier side, you might enjoy the hilly races. Even though those hills are going to be a struggle, you get to recover. You can actually coast on the downhills. That's about the only time in Zwift, you know, if you can get in a draft and coast, you might actually like those better. I did Zwift for a long time. I didn't do events. I was like intimidated by them. I didn't want to get dropped. Here's the thing, guys. It's a computer game. Nobody cares. Just do if you get dropped, you get dropped. I've actually found that I've had about as much fun going from the front all the way to the very back, just struggling, you know, in a big event or a big race, and then just enjoying working my way as, you know, maybe up a few places as I start to feel better near the end of the race. That's just as much fun as staying in the very front of the race. It really just, it's all about having fun, and the events are fun. I enjoy them now, and I get a lot from them. So don't be intimidated by them. Do the events, do races, and have a good time on Zwift. So see you.